Welcome back to Vinyl to Viral. And if you're watching on YouTube, TikTok, where else are we on Instagram? Can I be part of the viral generation right now and tell all the chat to drop a Filipino flag in the chat, in the comments, because we're celebrating Filipino American History Month here in the States. Actually, fun fact for the folks that don't know, Filipino American History Month actually was officially recognized by the U.S. Congress in 2009. So we're 16 years old, but we're celebrating, showing up for Filipinos all the time. But yeah, if you're watching online, drop a Filipino flag and share some love. Today's episode is super exciting because we're going to share and continue that Filipino love with our special guest.
Yeah, with us, I get to call this person a friend, homie, also a teacher in some certain ways with things that I've evolved and learned more and more about. One of the cool things that I was able to see in researching you for a little bit, someone called you a 5'1" Swiss Army knife. I thought that was a pretty cool way. I know you from being a former D1 athlete, also being someone who knows more about marijuana and definitely the roots of it, the medical side of it, not just, all the other stuff that Snoop talks about or Wiz Khalifa or any of that, but really knowing the ins and outs of the business. Someone who has been recognized as one of the top women fund managers in the game. This whole VC game, someone that even the Melinda French Gates Foundation has called one of the top emerging women-led fund managers in the U.S. back in 2023. Wow. So I'm really excited to have none other than Helene Servillon.
You got it.
I'll shoot. Of Journey One Ventures with us.
Well, thank you both for having me in beautiful Brooklyn. Here we go.
West to the east.
Yeah, it's the background in my history there's so many directions to go in, but let's start with the 5'1". I actually rounded up. I'm 5.5 on the ground, no shoes, and I roster 5'3".
I know that. I was 5'11" in high school.
Yeah, and I think when you're compact size, you learn how to be multi-talented in this big world, especially playing a taller person sport. And I think that attitude kind of has permeated throughout my life with my sports career into my professional career and also just like my personal development through this like growing process. I just turned 36.
Happy belated birthday.
Yeah, I celebrated the whole month of August, and now that it's October, we're very far from it. But
Are you a Leo?
I am a Leo cusper.
Okay.
Yeah, I describe myself as a social Leo and a professional Virgo.
That works well in your favor, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of main character energy, which my friend called me out on, and then I was like, no. Works. So, yeah.
Well, let's kick this thing off. I met you in the Bay. And for me, being from the East Coast, from Chicago kid shout, when I think about the Bay, especially post-2000, I know you just said you're 36, but whatever. I think you were born after 2000.
89, babe.
There you go. We think about tech, we think about innovation, we think about getting money. So even as I think about it, I think early in my time, I think Revenge of the Nerds, right? Like that's what I saw as Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, when I first actually got there. Like this is where Revenge of the Nerds won. So I imagine when you grew up, your yearbook stuff was more like not most likely to succeed, but it was more most likely to start Google, most likely to go to Stanford, most likely to take the VC world by storm. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing coming through the Bay and what it was like, and how far am I off with that statement?
It's really interesting because I think the Bay Area has this reputation of being this tech hub most recently. But, when I grew up in like the 90s, none of my friends' parents were in tech, and very little of my friends in high school were in tech either. They worked for the city government. My friends' parents were like principals of like Hoover Middle School. I went to Lowell, which is the oldest public school west of the Mississippi. San Francisco is known for being like a first generation like immigrant city for the most part. Lowell had like 75% Asian population within 2,600 students. So if you were non-Asian, you were like by transitive property Asian. And so, I think I grew up with that counterculture without even really knowing it because that was like my default culture. And so, even when I played volleyball and I started playing volleyball outside of the city in like the suburbs, that was like the first time I played with like predominantly like, just white, brown, or black outside of like Asian volleyball players because our school was so like homogenous to that degree.
How I know Lowell was like, because I went to school in the city too. I went to high school in the East Bay though, but growing up until 8th grade, I was in the city. And we know Lowell as, you're going there, you're a smart kid. And you're going to be going to college, you're going to be doing, these, like, we knew folks that go there or they go to like another private school like Lick or something. Like, no.
Super expensive.
Exactly.
For my family.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Hayward High in the East
cool.
Bay. So that was a culture shock for me. And I resonate so much with you. You just said a lot of, your family members or peers didn't, go into tech. A lot of them, whether it's like nursing or, blue collar jobs. So I resonated with that. I mean, even growing up, no one talked about going to Berkeley. No one in my family went to Berkeley in my immediate circle. It was just by luck that I had a counselor that said, I think you should go there. And I was like, go where? And because it wasn't, even though it was in our backyard, we just didn't talk about those things. It wasn't in my sphere of influence. So I resonate that with you being like, sort of being a trailblazer in those spaces, maybe in your first micro community.
Yeah, and I think going back to high school, like the things that people wanted to be were pretty boilerplate at that time. I mean, I graduated high school in 2007. It's like doctor, lawyer. It wasn't like a CEO of some fast-growing startup or even an entrepreneur. Like I didn't really grow up in
engineers.
I didn't grow up in entrepreneurial like community in my high school and my family, and I'm Filipino. Everyone's like, you should be a nurse, and I was like, I don't like science, and I don't like, I'm not a math person either, really. So I don't know how this is going to work out.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I think what I was surrounded by in my high school was this like very competitive, ambitious culture. At the time, like everyone had to take SATs, and there were 2,400, and students in my class would get like 95%, and they would retake it. And that's what Lowell, my high school, is known for. But going back to your question, Q, both my parents are from the Philippines, and my mom came to San Francisco in the 70s, and her side of the whole family started to migrate from the Philippines to the Bay. And for those who aren't familiar, there's a place called Daly City in the Bay Area that is like, Little Manila. And so I think with all these like migrations of people from outside the U.S., they gravitate to the communities where most of them are located. And for my family, it was the Bay Area. And I was raised by my mom, and she worked at San Francisco State in the disabilities program unit. And I'm the youngest of four, and, kind of the most responsible one.
Where did you see yourself after all of that? Where did you? I know you went to Northeastern. No, shout out Northwestern, because our schools, for some reason, people think we're the same. Boston, Chicago. But with all of that, what vision did you kind of have for yourself graduating in 2007 and heading east?
Yeah, I had no idea where I was going to go to college. I just had one goal, and that was to play D1 volleyball. And I went to a middle school that won 10 championships in a row for volleyball, and it fed into my high school, and we won like 15 championships in a row. And so we were the best in the city in AAA, which means like, I don't know what the comparison is, but like,
a smaller school or bigger school?
Like San Francisco public high school sports is competitive, but then you bring us to California where people are actually 6 foot tall, and it's a different beast.
Yeah, going south.
Yeah. And so, my sports ambition really drove me to get a partial scholarship at Northeastern in Boston. And, most recently, Northeastern has climbed the ranks of like top 100 school in the U.S. because of the co-op program and its global footprint. But, that was kind of the main focus, is like, I want to go where I can play. And how I got inspired to play is I read, I think it was the SF Chronicle at some point, and there was this woman who went to Sacred Heart in the city, and she ended up playing at Cal in my position. So I'm quite short for a volleyball player, and my position's called libero. So it's a different colored jersey when you're watching indoor volleyball, and you can like sub in and out infinitely. So it makes the game more competitive because you have someone playing defense forever. And the article was about how she ended up playing at Cal, but that she had a coach on the side to help train her on top of her team. And so I went to my mom and I said, I need to play club volleyball and I need a coach. And so I got that. I ended up playing club volleyball. I played for Cal Berkeley's junior club team my junior year, and we placed 9th in the country that year in the Junior Olympics. And so that kind of put me in sight of like top recruiters in the country, and we would travel. I never got on a plane till I was like 14, but we would go travel to like Atlanta, Minneapolis to go get scouted and go to these like huge convention centers where they would put up sport court. And so I got that taste of what it's like to like really compete when you're an underdog.
You talking about this competitive like nature, right? That you're just like taking club volleyball, brings you to the East Coast, and now you're at a D1, level. I can imagine that you take some of that with you into your own career. I could be wrong being in startups and VCs. Like you talk about Virgo energy, right? Some of that grit, that ambition, you got to play ball, right? And I think that's some of the best founders or people in startup culture. Like you have to be dedicated, right? And so I feel like that probably maybe translates well. I want to know how you started, but also more around Journey One. We did a podcast actually around caregiving recently. And in that podcast, we pretty much gave practical advice to families how to support caregivers and also end-of-life transitions. That was really personal for me because I've been a caregiver my whole life. I took care of my brother at the age of 12, like making formula. I took care of my dad before he passed away from cancer, and he was in his 40s. And I also took care of my grandparents who, they're in their, late 70s. We know that this space of like health and wellness is important and it shouldn't be forgotten, especially caregivers. Feels like sometimes like an invisible job. But earlier this year, I believe you met with the founder of care.com.
Sheila Marcelo.
Yes, our fellow Filipina, who's a pioneer actually in the care economy. And I really just like want to dig your brain around why it's important or why you found yourself investing or seeing this opportunity in frontier health and wellness.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I also want to call out, which is Filipinos drive the care economy globally. If you look at nurses and caretakers in Dubai to Rome, super Catholic culture, they're all over the place. And one of the reasons why too, like Filipinos are like really good transient cultures in other countries is because it is a English like forward speaking country with like all the outsourced call centers. It's like India and the Philippines. But so being an athlete and then growing up in a family where everybody has type 2 diabetes, and my mother is one of 6, and 5 out of those 6 siblings have had strokes from type 2 diabetes, including herself. It really made me try to figure out, as you get into your 20s, you're like, I want to go out into the world, do crazy shit, make money. And then you get to your late 20s, you're like, why am I doing this? This is like so hard. Why do I have to like work so hard for like once you get those titles and accomplishments? I went on this journey of trying to really move more into like what is my why and what is my superpower and how do I get there? And being an athlete and also coming from a city like San Francisco where everything is so against the grain and like pushing the bleeding edge of what's happening. I started my career in venture capital focused within the cannabis sector. And then it really evolved into, there's also a bigger picture here with just like alternative medicine and wellness and this move towards frontier wellness, what I call frontier health and wellness, which I think is permeating everything right now because there's such huge burnout culture. So everybody's like, when they have downtime, they just want to rest. And so I kind of saw this combination of things happening based with my own personal story and was like, this is an area where there's like abundant opportunity. And so like, let's double click into this. But when I met Q back in 2019, that was when I was really just getting started. I did my first investment Q1 of 2019. I've done about 21 deals now, have raised around $8 million worth of capital and have didn't grow up in a group with friends who were in finance. No one in my family was in finance. I didn't know jack about finance. And so it was this huge kind of move of like, all right, I want to impact my family, myself in a bigger picture, but I also want to do it on a larger scale. What's a way that I could do it? And I think, money can shift a lot of things. And I was like, I got to learn how that works because I grew up in a family with, limited resources. I'm making money. I don't even really know how to like save it. And so it was also not just, hey, I want to, work in venture capital, but I want to understand how money moves in the world because the people who are controlling it they just have unprecedented amount of power.
What lessons have you learned about that, about how money moves?
Ooh. I learned a lot about corporate America and lobbying. And, one of the big things that I saw when I started my career in venture was that these huge tech companies were moving elections. And I was like, how did they get there? And I was like, they got fueled by this insane amount of capital. And now they're like, standing second line at the presidential inauguration and having, 10-person big top tech company dinners with President Trump. And I'm like, wow, these guys are like running countries at this point. And so that was a catalyst to really start that journey within the finance world.
No, that's cool because, even at the time we met, and even before that, I helped launch a $500 million fund based off of Zuckerberg's money around housing, community development, affordable housing, and all of that. And it's been interesting to see that turn. And even, in our work on the nonprofit side, I understand all that lobbying, the advocacy and policy stuff that's being pushed. So like seeing, to your point, tech moving to the front of the line. And you knew that kind of really was based on money, right? It is interesting to hear that your experience, your journey even went into the side of the government. And how much they're continuing to control.
Who's moving it?
And the text, like in your space, has that been more of a hindrance in terms of like getting more people involved, more people that may not look like tech or sound like tech? Have there been people that you've seen that you didn't expect to be at the table?
When I got started in the VC game, this was actually just around the corner from the Me Too movement and right when also BLM was happening, 2019, 2020. And so there's this like huge influx of like, let's have more women control capital and more Black and brown people have access to capital. And so a handful of companies stepped up, like, Bank of America and PayPal, and they started investment arms to back more diverse fund managers. Even without having a mandate, I don't have to say I'm going to invest in women founders to end up having invested in women founders. Just because the people within your network and community you surround yourself with are going to be similar to your backgrounds. So just by like transitive property, you end up having more diverse leaders that you back in terms of what I do, founders. And so, yeah, I think if you look at the highest GDP performing like cities in the United States, it is the most diverse city, San Francisco, LA, New York. And it's not just, Americans, like they breed culture for having like immigrant founders come to the US and build. And they're hungrier than ever because some of them come from like even more competitive countries than the US, being a less resource entrepreneur like someone from India. Like they got 1 billion people to compete with. Here we have 340 million. And so the game is, very competitive. But yeah, I think diverse leadership is super important. And through my journey, I started when I was like 28, kind of going on, starting my firm. And I would have, 45-year-old women come up to me and be like, "You're so inspiring." And I'm like, what am I doing? And they're like, "Just keep doing it." And I'm like, okay, cool. I'll just keep my head down and keep doing it. And so it's been like a sign of just like trusting my path forward, where I can inspire the young generation of like Gen Z and Alpha. I hire a lot of fellows out of Northeastern, where I went to college, and I'm on the entrepreneurship board for Women's Entrepreneurship Board. And I do it because I hire specifically students who haven't worked in venture. And often at times they reach out to me wanting to like work for free. I'm not even like listing a job. And so I'll just take calls once in a while and I'll see if we gel. And I'm like, what motivates you? Like, what do you want to learn? And if they're just like doers, I'm like, let's go. Let's plug you in and figure it out. And then afterwards they end up working at some of the top VC funds. And I was like the first entryway in. And I'm like, wow, like this is how putting someone like me in this position impacts,
Sorry,
and what do these fellows do? What's part of their roles? Like if you don't have any experience, right, or you're curious, I saw you on LinkedIn and I book a call with you, we gel, and I don't know what I'm doing. Where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah, so for those who aren't as familiar with like what VC funds are, so I am a VC fund manager, so I'm a money manager. I myself am not rich yet. I own a lot of equity that hopefully will pan out in a few years, sooner rather than later. And so I'm a money manager, and I raise capital from mainly high net worth individuals. So in the United States, we call high net worth individual anybody who makes over $200,000 annually, or with their partner makes over $300,000 annually, or has like net worth assets of $1 million plus. And so they're only technically allowed to invest in certain types of like assets, like venture funds, which is another, story of like, well, can other people who don't make as much money invest? And so I created a strategy that I'm going to invest in early to growth stage frontier health and wellness companies. So early being pre-seed, so a company that may have no revenue and just an idea, to like Series B or Series C, maybe $50 to $100 million of revenue. And I tell my investors how I'm going to deploy that capital. And so some of the companies that we've backed is we invest across like consumer software and biotech, which are like three kind of broad, big categories. But one of the companies is the leader in male birth control globally. So it's a biotech company that's FDA regulated. They're furthest along in clinical trials. And there's only two forms of male contraception in the world right now, which is condoms and vasectomies. And vasectomies are not 100% reversible. So those are some of the things. And I've done a lot in the cannabis sector. So I'm an investor in a cannabis beverage company called Wonder. And in the US, there are 15 states where you can buy cannabis beverage alongside a seltzer and a beer in liquor stores. And without the industry really like even being that noticeable, it's doing $25 billion. And that's like small for the entire alcohol industry. So there's this movement that we're seeing where, a lot of the younger generations who don't want to drink because of the negative side effects of being hungover, but also a cocktail is $20 in New York. I mean, nothing is not $20 in New York.
I know.
And so people want to feel good and they're trying to save money. Alcohol has just been the social center. It's been the center of a lot of social experiences. And now that is shifting to other things that we're seeing, like social saunas.
Yeah, I'm not for that one.
Social saunas?
That sounds too hot for me.
We have some amazing bathhouses in New York City.
I've heard some stories about those bathhouses. I actually get a few emails that come to me on a weekly basis. But some of my friends have gone, but I didn't grow up in Chicago. We ain't had those. I
got to take you on an experience. I did an event at SF Tech Week last year called the Wellness Wind Down, because during a conference week, everyone's like eating or drinking, and then you go home and you're freaking exhausted, right? And so I was like, all right, well, how can we get people to connect, but do it where they're like feeling good? So in San Francisco, there is a social sauna and community spot in the Tender Knob is what they call it, not the Tenderloin.
Wow.
Yeah, they're trying to rebrand. It's like,
Wow.
I forget what is up here in New York where it's like,
Like Soha. Remember that? I was like, no, that's Harlem. I don't know what y'all talking
yeah,
about.
but they have one of the largest outdoor saunas where you can fit like 50 people.
Wow.
So we had like cold plunge and sauna and people, and beautiful robes and people are just hanging out, eating grapes. And they're like, this was a great experience. I got to connect with people and I don't feel exhausted.
That's actually like really genius because every time I, go attend a conference, especially if it's like technical, at the end of the day, after networking and listening to, you're wiped. You go to the hotel after even you do late dinners with teams or colleagues and you're like done. But to think that, you provided like this space where you can relax, also recharge at the same time. And it doesn't feel like everybody's sitting around at dinner and like you're on your last piece of juice. It's like this space where you're like, okay, I can breathe.
The brain and body needs a break.
Well, I know we probably lost a few of our male listeners as soon as you said the male contraceptions and all of that stuff. And it's like, ooh,
Coming.
Yeah, it is coming. I want to get back a little bit, thinking about my time with the Women's Foundation of California, serving on that board. And I remember towards the end of my tenure, we started to talk about 2030 being a huge year where the financial power shifted or would shift to women. So by 2030, if those folks aren't out there, I guess maybe all the old white guys are about to die and they got a lot of daughters and stuff. So when the money is going and transferring into the hands of women.
I call it my thesis on it is called Bye Bye Boomer.
Bye Bye Boomer.
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
When, I know it sounds like very morbid, but when, most baby boomers retire and die, it's when the most change, the next version of huge change is going to happen in the U.S. because most of them are sitting in political seats, C-suites, and it is a very different demographic. And they had a lot of great opportunity in that demographic, like a lot own houses. Millennials don't. I don't even know what Gen Z is about to do, but live in like little, like, what are those things called? Like drone apartments.
It's real. This is scary times.
It's just weird and different.
So are you seeing, or maybe not are you seeing, but if this change actually does occur and women are holding most of the bank by 2030, what do you see changing, even as we think about VC? You're talking about, frontier health and wellness. You're talking about things that I can see a lot of women getting behind. Are you seeing that in the work that you're doing? Are you seeing more money going to, say, more of this wellness, maternal health, any of the...
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier the Melinda French Gates Foundation. Pivotal Ventures is their venture arm. The Melinda French Gates Foundation supports a lot of variety of nonprofit, for-profit, female-led entities. And that alone has supported so many different organizations. And so, until COVID, there weren't really any healthcare funds that were focused just on women's health. We just started to peel back the challenges that women have with like menopause. There's a company called MIDI Health that's like leading the conversation in that regard. But we're still in the early phases of it. COVID was just 5 years ago. So when you think about like change, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens with like many little steps. And I think what I'm really excited about I think a little bit of a more spiritual level is just like more feminine energy at the top. I think right now with the political landscape, I just feel a lot of ego and masculine energy, and the world just needs to be a little softer. And I think that like sounds, weird to some people, and even in the entrepreneurial startup world, the word soft is not like a winning like attribute. It's like hard, fast, go, like win. And I think for myself, for my journey that I've been on, I started to really burn out because I was just always moving with masculine energy of like, it needs to work regardless of where I'm at with like my mental health. I need to push. And things just weren't working. And so I was working with an executive coach who was a bit more spiritual inclined. And she pointed out to me, every time the full moon would happen, I would like have just like crazy anxiety. And she's like, have you looked at the moon cycle? And I'm like, no. And then I would be like, oh my God, it's a full moon. And then she's like, maybe the moon represents feminine energy. And she had told me, maybe it's a time to practice a little bit more softness. And as I did, somehow my anxiety during full moons really lowered. Wow. And so now I have a moon ring that I always wear. And it just, to me, it represents just this reminder of like trust in yourself. Is super important for anything that you do, and just knowing that like the universe will take care of you. Yeah. Not a lot of people talk about that in business because it's a little too quote unquote woo woo, but I love that shit.
Nah. I mean, on the heels of Dr. Heinemann, like the Tubbs, right? Like, yeah, I'm with that. The patriarchy has to come down a little bit, and that energy has to dwindle as well. But I also hear you saying like, this is a time where we need to heal, whether it's the world, whether, it's our economy, but, it feels like a period of healing. And so all of that energy, again, being former athletes, we know rest is important. You can't keep going. You're going to break down.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in your 20s and your teens, like your body can do ungodly things. But now that I'm in my mid-30s, I got to like adjust and sleep. Even before me coming onto this trip to New York, I'm going to be here for a full 7 days. And anybody who is visiting New York knows that it's not a vacation. The energy of the city and the subways just make you move no matter what. Decided to just rest the weekend before and was like, I got a lot of stuff going on. Let me like be prepared and harness like some strong energy before I take this trip.
I love it. Want to hit you with some quick takes, some rapid fire. Sometimes we end our things with like just trying to get you to say some quick things for our listeners out there that they can use for their own walk of life. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, and even kind of feels even about our relationship as well, but I grew up on that like day ones mentality, no new friends, and all of that. But as I've gotten older, I've abandoned that. Like, I still got my day ones, but day ones end up turning to be like 2-3 people. And I'm always more excited with the people I meet along the journey. And then as I look at my sphere of influence now, I see way more new friends in my sphere than I do day ones. What has been your experience of that? What has brought more joy or value for you?
Well, I went through some life shit in 2023, and it shook up my whole world socially and professionally. And I think one of the, I don't know if it's like a principle or a motto that I live by is like legacy does not necessarily equal loyalty. And I think that as you grow, and if you are someone who is always changing and open to change, like you are constantly changing, and so are the people around you. And sometimes you have chapters with them, or you have novels. So like letting a relationship live in a chapter and not feeling like it has to be part of your whole life allows me, at least, to really embrace that moment in time that we have this bond. And if we can transcend together into the next chapter, it's really beautiful to experience that growth. But sometimes, people, they go through their own hardships, and you might not be in relation, we might not be able to relate to that, but there's nothing to be mad about. It's just that's what's so. And so I think as I've gotten older, I've had these experiences like you mentioned where I'm just like clicking with people instantly, and I'm like, oh my God, are you my soul sister?
Where have you been?
Yeah, like I feel like we just met like years ago. And I think that is because of where I'm at with myself and showing up. I just know my strengths and my weaknesses. I know who I love and who I fuck with and who I don't. And one thing that I've realized is like there are going to be some angry people in the world, and like, assholes, but they don't need to be my people. They can be people, but they don't need to be in my circles.
I think I was like selfishly interested in your answer just because what I know around Bay Area culture and friends is we're so tight knit, like whether you're from San Jose or you're from the city or you're from Oakland, the town, it's just like you rep so hard, and you're like, sometimes it can be no new friends or the Bay over. And what you shared is like taking it out of just, where you're from and really not internalizing all the other things, but you said, I know my strengths and my weaknesses. You said, I know that if we can transcend together, then it's a great thing. And if not, it's not personal. It's sort of just we are in this phase where we're not in the same place, and that is okay. You know, it doesn't have to be a pitting against each other, somebody's right or wrong. We're just not in the same place. So I was like my own person. I was like, I get that a lot. And I also see that too with people that leave home just in general, whether you're from the Bay or not, people that go to college and start careers in other places or travel, you know, you do transform as a person. You do meet people along, you know, your walk of life, and you're like, where have you been? Or this moment was supposed to happen, you know, this way. So I love that you share that. You have your own testimony around that. My question to you is, you know, being in this world of startups and fundraising and hedge funds and VCs, I want to know, what does your family think about your job? And do they think you have a real job?
They absolutely don't. I mean, we didn't get to talk about my other career path, but I've worked in the electric bicycle industry back before bike share hit the ground in the US. And so my friends are like, what do you do? And so that's been like the common thing of like, what is Helene doing now? I'm kind of like my own little like internal startup of like always changing and coming up with ideas. I kind of always have to break it down into layman's terms. Like they don't even really talk about startups or tech. You know, Filipino families are like, what did you eat today? Like, you know, what do you, it's not like some of my conversations with my family that I'm trying to evolve are into deeper conversations. Like I like to call them DCs. And I even started telling my family a few years ago, Mama, I'm going to be offline this week. I'm going to Burning Man. And she's like, what's that? And I'm like, I guess it's kind of like Woodstock, but the modern version. But it's a great place to you know, meet people, connect. It's like a social professional thing to many degrees. And so, you know, just explaining to them, explaining to them, you know, what my life is like is always a work in progress. I don't know if it ever sticks, honestly.
My friends and family still don't know what I do.
Yeah, just be like, Mom, I'm not a liability. That's all you got to worry about.
Right. I can take care of myself. The bills are paid. I'm eating, you see, and I'm well. So something's working. Something's sticking.
What's been the most exciting part of your journey?
I think where I'm at right now is I found this really fun intersection between harmonizing work and play. And my good buddy, Brandon Coffer, I'll shout out to him. He's part of a community called Sandbox, which is a global community of change makers across 40 hubs in the world. And it's all volunteer led. And it started on the premise of like, what if the world's leaders met in their early 20s? So it started as like a under 30 community. And he really inspired me to have this like vision of like, what if you could work and play with your friends? And what that means to me is that like, I don't have to show up as a different person in whatever environment I'm in. Like my professional Helene is the same as personal, you know, social Helene. I have so many talented friends. Like, why don't we all make money together? Like if I'm in a castle and all my homies are like in the village, like one, that's just rough.
Draw the gate.
Yeah, I want my homies to rise with me and for us to have fun together. And it's just beautiful to really exercise in that. And I think it goes back to how people back in the day used to be more communal. Like you didn't have this global world. Like everything was in like your village or your city. And everyone had this like incredible talent to contribute to that community, whether it was like the baker, the farmer, or like the accountant or banker. And so thinking about the future of my life in this idea of like, let's just use our talents to create cool shit in the world and have fun doing it. That's what I'm most excited about.
No, that's dope. That's dope. Top of my career algorithm is joy. And I remember sharing that with one of the members of my no longer that exists. It's like an executive committee for Lighthouse. When I said it to her, she was just like, you don't believe that, right? Like it hit her like on the side of her head because it was so not go for it. Not like the energy you talked about before, even like being an athlete, it was so like more reserved and relaxed. And I was just like, yeah, the way my life started, I don't want to have to keep pounding the pavement, hitting my head, running into the walls, feeling like every part of this is a struggle. It's like, no, the end of my career, as my career continues to evolve, that algorithm, the equal sign on the right, is joy. And I'm hearing you say a little bit about that too. At least I'm taking some of that, from you. So I'm glad that you shared that with our audience because, yeah, sometimes we just get too wrapped up into what the Forbes magazines are saying, Fortune, Success magazines, all of these magazines. So, yeah, I really know our listeners will appreciate you sharing that part with us. Man, if the leaders, if we met in our 20s, like that's kind of dope. And we'll be able to do it in our 40s and 50s together. Yeah.
I think the world is going back to the basics of what it means to be happy and healthy. And because if you don't have those, then like, at least for me, I don't understand why I would do anything if I'm not, right with myself. And if I'm not smiling, it's like, what is it for?
Where are we going to find you next year?
Where are you going to find me next year? Well, I have some big visions. I just turned 36. And one thing that I'm super excited to create at some point, I'm not sure what type of form it's going to turn into, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit entity, but I am very zoned in on finding a way to integrate personal finance into high school and college curriculum. Because I don't know why we need to learn about geometry and protractors and isosceles triangles. I just don't get it.
Oh, my heart.
And when I went, when I went to college, signed a bunch of student loans, and I'm still paying for a lot of them. And I think that when you exit into an independent adult life, that is like one of the most important things to understand is like, how do you take care of your personal finance? And it comes, there's different elements of wellness. And I think financial wellness really impacts people on a big level. And then no one likes to talk about money. So it's like all this like stigma about it that we just need to break down. And I think that will really fuel, generations to come with just being more confident as adults and knowing how to move, in the world with the resources and wealth that they make.
I love it. You're right. We do need it.
Yeah.
We need a lot more of that. I still think we need geometry. A couple engineers.
The engineer.
Hurts.
Yeah, I told you earlier I wasn't really like the science. And
So good.
Well, where can we support you if we have a listener? We have a really diverse audience. We may have somebody in here that like, I want to connect with Helene. How can we support you? Where can we find you online?
Yeah, well, the fortunate thing about my name is that it has an incredible SEO. Helene Servillon. I have a handful of other podcasts. They're a little dated, but still recent and easily found on LinkedIn. I don't really use X anymore for a handful of reasons, but I am happy to connect with anybody. If you shoot me a personal note, because sometimes people shoot notes and they're like, hey, what's up? Can I pick your brain? And I'm like, that doesn't sound comfortable. And just being very upfront of like, I'm looking to learn about this. One of my taglines on Instagram is always learning. And I really appreciate when people are just vulnerable about what they're looking for. And it's sometimes hard to know how to ask that question. But I think one of the biggest things, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is there's no bad questions. You have to ask questions to figure it out.
Great. Love it.
Well,
you got us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's such a special episode, like I said, because we're also dropping this during Filipino American History Month. So we're just showing more sides of who we are and the impact that we have here, even in the States.
More cool kids.
More cool kids.
We call friends.
Yeah, on our table. So thank you so much.
Yeah, can we do a last minute shout out to all the known cool Filipinos out there outside of our parents and family and friends?
Oh, that's dope.
Olivia Rodrigo's Filipino. Enrique Iglesias, the lead singer of Temper Trap. Manny Mancita was one of the first, I think, Asian C-suite executives of Bain Consulting.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that.
There's a handful of other fund managers. There's probably maybe only 20 to 30 Filipino fund managers leading firms across the globe. So excited for our people to share more about our culture and community. And I think that amongst a lot of the different groups of Asians out there, the Filipino story has yet to be told.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that we're writing it.
Shout out to the Black Filipinos out there too.
That's
Oh, yes.
Appreciate y'all seeing y'all in the league now in the NBA and stuff. We're doing
Got a
that.
handful
Ron
of
Harper's
cousins.
son. Yeah, you know, they're about to be mine. Shoot, no, that's dope. No, I love that. I love that. Thank you for ending with that.
Well, that's what we got for you guys today. We'll see you
Yeah.
next time on Vinyl to Viral.